At Kursk, a German tank could survive almost anything that came at its face. That was the mistake. The front plate was thick, the side armor was guarded. The gun was feared from miles away. But above the crew's heads, on the turret roof, there was a strip of steel so thin that a man could measure it with 2 fingers and still have room left over. 15 millimeters on some Panzer roofs, 25 on a Tiger. Not a wall, a lid. And in the summer of 1943, Soviet pilots learned how to tear that lid open from the sky. A lieutenant in an Il-2 Shturmovik came in over the smoke at medium altitude, his canopy vibrating, his engine growling like it was full of stones. Below him, German armor crawled across the steppe in dark lines. Panzer IV Panthers, Tigers, assault guns, trucks, smoke, dust, men waving signals through the fire. From the ground, those tanks looked almost untouchable. From the front, many of them nearly were. But the pilot was not trying to hit the front. He was not even trying to rake the side. He rolled the Il-2 over, pushed the nose down, and aimed at the one place German armor had treated as an afterthought. The ceiling. The story of the Il-2 is usually told as a story of strength. The flying tank, the armored attacker, the brutal machine that came low over German trenches with cannon, rockets, bombs, and machine guns. And that reputation was not invented. The Il-2 carried armor the way other aircraft carried paint. Its engine, cockpit, radiator, and fuel system were wrapped inside an armored shell built into the aircraft itself. Not decoration, not a field modification, a steel bathtub in the sky. German ground troops learned to respect it fast. But respect was not the same as helplessness. In 1941 and 1942, Il-2 regiments paid for every attack in blood. New Soviet pilots reached the front with frighteningly little flying time. Some learned the aircraft, the target, the fear, and the price of a mistake all in the same week. Sometimes in the same morning. The Shturmovik could survive punishment that would have shredded lighter planes. It could limp home with holes through the wings, oil on the windshield, chunks missing from the tail. But it could also be killed, and it was killed often. The deeper problem was worse than losses. The Il-2 was being asked to destroy tanks, and against the best German armor, it often could not do it reliably. A 20-millimeter cannon could tear through trucks, guns, open positions, half-tracks, exposed infantry. Rockets could frighten crews and sometimes smash a vehicle if fortune lined up perfectly. But tanks were not built to reward almost. At shallow attack angles, Soviet fire struck sloped plates, side skirts, turret faces, or upper hull edges. Even when a pilot hit the target, the shell might ricochet, break apart, or wound the machine without killing it. Against a late Panzer IV, the strongest frontal armor was about 80 millimeters. Against Panther and Tiger armor, the problem became uglier. More gun did not automatically solve it. Soviet attempts to mount heavier weapons on attack aircraft created another trap. A larger cannon could punch harder, but it also dragged the aircraft down, kicked the nose offline, reduced handling, and made accurate shooting in combat brutally difficult. A tank is a small target when the ground is rushing up at you. A moving tank is smaller. A moving tank while flak is reaching for your face is smaller still. So the Soviet problem in 1943 was not courage. They had courage. It was not production. They were building aircraft and tanks at astonishing scale. It was not even hatred. By Kursk, both armies had more than enough of that. The problem was geometry. German tanks had been designed around a simple assumption. The deadliest threats would come from the horizon. Enemy tanks, anti-tank guns, field guns, mines below, rifle fire and shell fragments above. That logic made sense in the war. Germany thought it was preparing to fight. The thick steel went where the horizontal threat was expected to arrive. Front, mantlet, sides, sometimes skirts, sometimes extra plates. The roof remained thin because the roof was not supposed to be the battlefield. But war has a way of punishing the word supposed. At Kursk, the German offensive pressed into the Soviet defenses with an enormous weight of armor. The southern face of the salient became a furnace of dust, diesel, burning grass, and shattered metal. Soviet tank crews fought close enough to see the crosses on enemy turrets. Anti-tank guns fired until their crews were buried in dust. Infantry lay in slit trenches while steel rolled over the earth above them. And in the air, Il-2 regiments were still searching for the method that would turn courage into results. Because if the Shturmovik could only frighten tanks, the Germans could keep coming. If it could kill them, the entire shape of the battle changed. The answer was not a new aircraft. It was not a heroic ace with a miracle aim. It was a small bomb, a steep angle, and a weak roof. The bomb was called the PTAB 2 Num Mot 5. It weighed only 2.5 kilograms. Small enough to disappear in a mechanic's hands. Small enough that one Il-2 could carry them by the dozens, and in many loadouts roughly 192 of them. But inside that small casing was a shaped charge. On impact, it did not behave like an ordinary blast. It focused its force into a narrow jet of metal and heat that could punch through armor far thicker than the roof plates of most German tanks. A PTAB did not need to smash the whole tank from the outside. It only needed to enter. Once it did, the inside of the vehicle became the battlefield. Hot fragments, pressure, fuel vapor, ammunition. Crew stations packed inside a steel box that had just become a furnace. The genius was not that one bomb was powerful. The genius was that one aircraft could drop a carpet of them. A strip of destruction, roughly the length of several tanks, and wide enough to cover a column if the pilot put it in the right place. That changed the mathematics of air attack. Earlier methods asked a tired, frightened pilot to hit a tank with near-perfect precision while the world fired back. The PT method asked him to put a cloud of shaped charges over a formation and let probability do what marksmanship could not. But even that had a condition. The bomblets had to meet the roof, not the side, not the front, not the turret cheek at a bad angle. The roof. So Il-2 pilots had to fly a profile that was both logical and terrifying. They approached above the worst low-level fire, then dropped into a steep attack, often far sharper than the shallow strafing passes German crews had learned to expect. The nose came down, the ground expanded. The tank columns stopped being a line and became individual turrets, hatches, engine decks, exhausts, men, shadows. The pilot had seconds. Too early and the bomblets spread uselessly. Too late and the aircraft was already too low. Too shallow and the armor became sloped again. Too steep and the pullout could kill him even if German guns did not. There are tactics that sound simple on paper because paper does not have fear in it. Attack from above. Release at the correct moment. Exploit the weak roof armor. Those words are clean. The cockpit was not. The Il-2 was heavy, armored, and honest about gravity. It did not forgive careless handling. In a steep dive, the pilot could feel the aircraft gather speed and weight. The gun sight bounced. Tracers rose. German 20mm flak crews learned quickly that the diving path was predictable for a few seconds. And a predictable aircraft is a target. The first man in the attack line carried the worst bargain. He gave the German gunners the clearest look. The aircraft behind him flew through smoke, dust, panic, and bursts from the first impacts. They were not safe. But the first pilot opened the wound. 6 Il-2s came in, then 8, sometimes more. One after another, 5 seconds apart, each aircraft adding another strip of bomblets across the column. From inside a German tank, there was almost no good answer. A tank could turn its hull against a gun. It could reverse from a minefield. It could angle against a known anti-tank position. But it could not make its roof thicker in the 10 seconds between hearing an engine and seeing the sky fall. That was the hidden horror of the new attack. It attacked an assumption. German tank crews had already adapted to many things on the Eastern Front. They had learned how Soviet anti-tank guns were placed. They had learned that infantry might wait until armor passed, and then strike the supply vehicles behind. They had learned to fear mines, mud, artillery, and the moment a Soviet defensive line seemed too quiet. But this was different. The threat did not come from the line of sight their machine was built around. It came from the place the machine could not face. The armor that looked magnificent from a propaganda photographs suddenly had a blind side no photographer had cared to show. The top. At Kursk, when PTABs were first used on a large scale, German armored units felt the effect almost immediately. The exact numbers are still disputed, as they should be. Battle reports in a fight that large are never clean. Pilots overclaimed. Ground units misidentified wrecks. Burning vehicles could be counted twice or not at all. Some tanks were destroyed. Some were disabled. Some were repaired later. But the tactical shock was real. Soviet pilots had found a way to make German armor vulnerable at scale. Not one tank for one perfect shot. Not one legendary pilot with a special cannon. A system. An aircraft that could be produced in huge numbers. A bomblet that could be loaded by the hundreds. A tactic that a regiment could practice, repeat, refine, and throw against the armored spearheads again and again. This mattered because Germany's armored advantage was not only about machines. It was about confidence. The belief that if a Panther or Tiger reached the decisive place, Soviet weapons would have to pay terribly to stop it. The PTAB did not erase that advantage. Nothing erased it. But it changed the cost of German movement under Soviet air attack. A tank commander now had to think about the empty space overhead. A formation commander had to think about spacing. A driver had to think about smoke, concealment, and the sound of engines. A crew that once trusted its frontal steel had to understand that the safest angle on the battlefield might no longer exist. And the Soviet side understood something just as important. They did not need the perfect anti-tank aircraft. They needed a good enough aircraft carrying the right weapon, attacking the right weakness, in numbers large enough to matter. That was the character of much of the Soviet war effort. Not elegance, scale, not the single beautiful machine. The repeatable solution. The Il-2 was not graceful. It was blunt, armored, loud, and dangerous even to the men who flew it. But paired with the PTAB and the top attack profile, it became something German tank design had not fully priced in. An answer from above. Picture the moment from the tank side. A Panzer grinding forward through yellow dust. The commander half raised in the cupola. The gunner staring into the sight. The loader with one hand on the next round. The driver blind except for a slit battlefield. The radio crackling. The engine roaring. The front armor pointed toward the enemy everyone can see. Then a shadow cuts across the turret roof. Not in front, not beside. On top, the commander looks up. There is no time to turn a turret at the sky. No time to reverse out of a carpet already falling. No time to negotiate with the thickness of steel that factory designers chose years earlier, because other threats had seemed more urgent. For 1 second, the tank is not a fortress. It is a box with a thin lid, and the sky is opening it. This is why the story outlived the battle. The principle did not end with Kursk. It became one of the central ideas of anti-armor warfare. Do not always fight the strongest face. Find the face the designer discounted. Later anti-tank weapons would make top attack logic more precise, more guided, more electronic, more lethal. Missiles would fly over vehicles and strike downward. Loitering munitions would search for engine decks. Modern tank designers would add sensors, active protection, cage structures, and roof defenses because the old lesson refused to die. The roof is never just the roof after someone proves it can be a door. But before all that, it was men in heavy Soviet aircraft over the Eastern Front. It was mechanics loading small-shaped charges into bomb bays before dawn. It was pilots memorizing release timing because a few meters too early or late could decide everything. It was German armor moving with its confidence aimed forward, and it was the sudden discovery that confidence has a shape. Sometimes it is 80 millimeters thick in front. Sometimes it is 15 millimeters thin above. The Il-2 did not win Kursk alone. No aircraft did. The battle was too vast for that kind of myth. Kursk was artillery, mines, reserves, tank armies, railroads, factories, intelligence, weather, exhaustion, and men on both sides spending their lives by the thousands. But the Shturmovik found one of the cleanest truths in the entire battle. A weapon does not have to defeat the enemy everywhere. It only has to find the place where the enemy stopped imagining danger. That was the 15-millimeter gap. Not a missing plate, not a secret hatch. A belief built into steel. From the front, the German tank looked like the future of war. From above, it looked like an assumption. And once the Il-2 pilots saw that, the battlefield changed. The Wehrmacht had armored the horizon. The Shturmoviks found the ceiling.